The White House Farm murders took place in Essex, England on the night of the 6th of August 1985. Neville and June Bamber were shot and killed inside their farmhouse, along with their adopted daughter Sheila and her two twin sons, Daniel and Nicholas. The only surviving member of the family was June and Neville's adopted son, Jeremy Bamber, who said he had been at his home a few miles away at the time of the shootings. It was initially believed that Sheila, who had schizophrenia, had committed the murders and then turned the gun on herself, but a few weeks later, Jeremy Bamber's girlfriend came forward saying that it was in fact Jeremy who was responsible, with his motive being the possibility of a large inheritance after their deaths. Bamber was convicted of 5 counts of murder when it was found that a silencer used on the gun meant Sheila's fingers were too short to reach the trigger. This meant that Jeremy had shot the whole family and then placed the gun in his dead sister's hand to make it look like a murder-suicide. Bamber was sentenced to an initial 25 years in prison, but then 8 years later was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. You probably recognise this girl. This is 18-year-old Isabella Guzman on trial for the murder of her mother, Yoon Mi-hoy. Growing up, Isabella had a bad relationship with her mother, who she resented for bringing her up in a poorer household than her friends. On August 28, 2013, Isabella's stepfather called the police when he saw blood pooling under the door of the upstairs bathroom, which Isabella and Yoon-mi were inside. This was the second time he had called the police that day, the first call coming after Isabella had threatened her mother by saying, "You will pay." By the time the police arrived, it was too late for Yoon-mi, and Isabella had already fled the scene. She was found the next day still covered in blood, and it was revealed in Yoon-mi's autopsy that Isabella had stabbed her mother a total of 79 times in the face and neck. Isabella was denied the death penalty due to reason of insanity, and she is currently in a mental institute. She claims that she suffered years of abuse at the hands of her family, but there are no current plans for her release. Story time. When I was a child, my family and I moved into a big old 2-story house. Both my parents worked, so I was often home alone when I came home from school. One evening when I came home, the house was still dark. I called out for my mum just in case she was home and heard her sing-song voice reply from upstairs. I called her again as I climbed the stairs to see which room she was in and again heard the same response. We were decorating the house at the time and I didn't quite know my way around the maze of rooms yet, but I knew she was in one of the far ones right down the hall. Just as I reached for the handle of the door to let myself in the room, I heard the front door downstairs open and my mother call out for me. I jumped back terrified and ran down the stairs to her, but as I glanced back, the door to the room slowly opened a crack, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw something staring back at me. Don't listen to this if you get scared easily. Part 2. Everyone who came over said that they felt really uncomfortable in the house, especially in my bedroom. Over the following weeks, weird things kept happening. The shower door would start to rattle as if someone was trying to get in, even when I was home alone. Also, when I FaceTimed my friends, they told me they saw things moving in the background of the call. I even caught the TV turning off and on by itself. After a while, we decided we really didn't want to live in this house anymore, but a week before we moved, we had a friend stay over and she was sleeping on the sofa. One night, I was in my room on FaceTime when I heard my friend scream my name. I ran into the room to see what was going on and she said, "Why were you watching me sleep? I swear to God, I just woke up and you were watching me sleep." I'm done. Story time. Every year, my family is in charge of putting up the Christmas tree in our local church. Every year, my grandpa would come and help until the year he sadly died. So, for the first time, me, my uncle, dad, and little sister, who was 3 at the time, went to the church alone. The decorations for the tree are stored in the basement of the church, so we went to go and get them. To get into the basement, there are about 20 concrete steps going down into a dark room. But my little sister didn't know this and walked straight through the door and fell all the way down the concrete steps. My uncle and dad were obviously terrified she would have seriously injured herself or even worse and went running down after her, but when they found her, she was completely uninjured and unfazed. The scary part of the story is when my dad asked her if she was okay, she said, "Somebody caught me." And since then, we've always thought that my great-grandpa might have been with us all along. Don't listen to this if you get scared easily. Part 1. Growing up, I've always lived in houses where creepy stuff has happened, but this one was different. We signed a 12-month lease on a house, and the first 7 or 8 months were completely normal. But one day, my mum was carrying laundry upstairs when she swore she saw something in the corridor. She saw what she described as the Grim Reaper standing by the window in broad daylight. Ever since then, weird things started to happen, especially in my bedroom. Specific items of mine would go missing and then reappear a couple of days later in the middle of my bedroom floor. Then things started rolling around on the floor, and bear in mind I had no air conditioning or drafts in my room. And then one night I was woken up by a massive crash where my entire vanity fell to the floor but nothing broke. The only thing still standing was a candle which I'd lit the night before, which was the shape of a Virgin Mary. Story time. My granddad passed away from lung disease aged 82 on Boxing Day 2019. Ever since then, about once a month, I either see him in my dreams or I get a quick glimpse of him in my house. It was my grandma's birthday about a month ago, and it was the first one without my granddad there. My grandma took all her gifts into the little living room, and as she stood there completely still and silent, I heard a man's voice say Tet, which is what my granddad used to call her. It sounded just like him, and I'm convinced I heard my granddad try and get her attention that day. Story time. When I was younger, I kept having the same repeating dream about an alleyway in the town where I live. It didn't exist in real life, but I kept getting really freaked out about it. One night, when I was having the same exact dream, a strange man in the alleyway told me I needed to go there. After a lot of persuading, the next day me, my mum and my dad went into the city centre about 40 minutes away from us to try to find the alley. As we walked to the place in my dream, we noticed an alleyway going off the main path that we'd never noticed before. And down that alleyway, I saw the same creepy man that was in my dream. I still haven't told anyone about it because I know they wouldn't believe me, but I think about it every day. Story time. My boyfriend and I bought a very old house. He was in charge of bringing in all the furniture and doing the heavy lifting while I was on wallpaper removal duty. The previous owner had papered every wall and ceiling. Removing it took ages but was oddly satisfying, kind of like peeling skin when you get sunburnt. I started peeling the paper away and discovered that under a corner section of paper in every room was a person's name and a date. Curiosity got the better of me, and one night I googled the names. I discovered that the person was actually a missing person, and the missing date matched the date under the wallpaper. We immediately notified the police and they sent out a crime scene team. After looking around a bit, they came up to me and said, "Where's the wallpaper you removed from the walls?" Turns out it wasn't wallpaper. I'm done. Story time. One evening, my wife and I had picked up our daughter from her friend Sally's birthday party. We brought her home and put her into bed. But later that night, after I'd gone to bed, I heard her come into our room. She came up to the edge of the bed and started pulling up my shirt sleeve. "Guess how old I'm going to be next month?" she said. "I don't know. How old?" I replied, still half asleep. She smiled at me and held up 4 fingers. My wife and I have been up with her for almost 8 hours, pleading with her, but she still refuses to tell us where she got them. This house was so haunted, nobody could live there. In the 1870s, a family living in Surrency, Georgia, started experiencing terrifying paranormal activities in their home. They reported witnessing objects soaring across rooms, hearing laughter and crying, and seeing red eyes staring into their house. Food was thrown from their plates and the utensils were twisted into unusable shapes. The townspeople speculated that these occurrences were cries for help from spirits who thought the family would be able to save them. On the day the family decided to finally leave the house, a fire iron allegedly floated up and started beating one of the sons in the head. No one was ever brave enough to live in the house again, and the building went up in flames in 1925.